Sup, guys? We keep on winning. I don't know what I think I'm 15 wins in the last 20 days now or something like that. 2-0 last night. It looked like it was going to be 1-1 and a slight loss with the Dallas picks yesterday. The sweep of Dallas is what happened. The Dallas Stars won. I don't even know exactly what went down in that game. I paid no attention to it. I was out. They won 2-0 against Winnipeg. I don't know. It looks like Winnipeg did outplay them statistically a bit, but we get the win, so I'll take it. And then, and it was at the very least, it was kind of close. At least I would say. I don't know statistically. And then the Dallas Mavericks, they were able to pull that out. That was one where it was like back and forth, where there were points where it looked like they were not going to cover at all, points where it looked like they were. And then how did it wind up? Like the ending of that game confused me. Dallas was winning like pretty big for the early portion of the game. They had the lead out of the gate, and then like for almost the first like entire half, and then all of a sudden they were behind by a bit in the third quarter. Then they flipped it back, and they got back into a pretty decent lead in the fourth. I think they were back up 8 or 9 with like not that much time left, with a few minutes left. So then it looks like, all right, they're going to cover again. Houston gets back to within the number. And then I saw on my score app, it listed the final as Dallas winning 119-115 or something. So they won by 4. And I'm like, that would have been brutal because I laid 4.5 and not thinking that the line was going to go down during the day. And it did. It went down to like 3.5 at one point. So I could have gotten 1 point better. And in the NBA 4, I mean, it's a little bit key. I guess it's 2-point buckets. So like the importance of the number maybe coming into play there. And not expecting the line to move where it did. Although I think it wound up back at like 4.5. I don't know. It was at 5.5 earlier. It dropped a little. I took it at 4.5, and then it dropped more, and it was at 3.5, I think, and then back up to 4.5. I don't know. I was just I was mostly reading the situation like I usually do. The market was a little bit of confusion for me on that game there. But what happened was so I think what happened at the end of that game was there was an intentional foul committed by Houston, or they were trying to intentionally foul. And I think originally it was ruled that it was after time had expired. So the game was over. Dallas wins by 4. But then I guess they took like a second look at it and said, oh no, there was actually like a fraction of a second on the clock. So it is an intentional foul. So I think it was Doncic got sent to the line. So they actually, I think they changed the call and said, yes, the foul did happen while there was still time on the clock. So he gets 2 free throws instead, and he hits them both. So then Dallas gets back up. He needed to hit 1 of 2 to cover the spread at that point, really. And he hit both. So it puts Dallas up 6. And then I'm looking at like the play-by-play, and it says Houston attempted a 3-pointer after that too, which I don't even see how that's possible with a fraction of a second left, how you could inbound it and catch and turn and shoot a 3. Like it seemed like it was only enough time to like try to tip something in, but I have no idea. Obviously they did not hit a 3, but that ending seemed like it was pretty crazy for people that were on the 4.5, like I was right there in the mix there, because I thought it was going to be a half-point loss. I saw that listed as the final, and then I looked again, and it was like, no, the final was actually Dallas won by 6. I'm like, wait, what just happened? So I guess the call was changed so that they ruled that it was a foul with time still left. That's insane. Let's get to today, because I actually have a lot of plays. I have 6 plays today and you know what that means. College basketball is in full swing, man. College basketball, and there are some other like leans that I probably have in college basketball, but in the interest of time, I got to just go with just talk about the actual plays here and hope I don't talk way too long on them, because I got to get out of here. We have too much to do, man. I have a job besides this, unfortunately. So college basketball, we're starting to get into a conference play as well with some of the smaller conferences. Some of them are playing their first conference game. I don't think I'm on any of those today, though. But we have a full Wednesday college basketball slate, where I think college basketball, it's either Tuesday or Wednesday, and then, of course, Saturday, they get the full college basketball slate, so it takes a lot to, like, run down the entire card. The way I do it is I kind of start focusing on particular, like, matchups and stuff and just kind of ignore even though there's probably some value to be had in some of the smaller conferences, I kind of start ignoring some of those because I don't see like situational angles to play in a lot of those sometimes. But let's get into it, man. It's a full college basketball slate. Play number one. What are we going with first? St. Joe's plus 14.5. How about that? And I don't see any market percentages on this yet, although Villanova looks like they've gone down from 15.5 or maybe even 16 down to 14.5. I don't think there's that much of a difference. They're not losing that much value with that. Hopefully those points don't really matter there. I'm taking St. Joe's plus 14.5. I don't think this is a good spot for Villanova, and I think there are some positives for St. Joe's here. Villanova just won the battle for Atlanta, so I'm actually fading two teams today that won these early season tournaments, which fading teams that win those tournaments tends to be a decent angle sometimes because the teams are, of course, that probably means they won some big games and they're kind of like high on themselves after that, and they might have a little bit of a letdown. I think this arguably is a little bit of a sandwich as well for Villanova here because they had that battle for Atlantis. Their last four games are all wins against big conference teams. They beat Maryland, Texas Tech, North Carolina, and Memphis. I don't know if all of those were in the battle for Atlantis, but the last three, I believe at least, certainly were, and they won that tournament. The win over North Carolina was in overtime, and that was huge. They didn't have a letdown going into the game against Memphis, which I believe was the final in that tournament there, and they beat Memphis as well. Now they come out of that, and that was I forget where that even was, the battle for Atlantis. Where did they even have that? Bahamas? Yeah. So now they come out from the Bahamas. They have to come back home, and that was on November 24th. So they're returning. It's like returning home from a road trip. Even though you have 4 days off, you're coming home. I mean, you're college kids. Like the home distractions, you don't have like the family life, but you do have like, we got to return home. We're returning home to college, and you have the return to campus life, that type of thing. You still have like distractions from, even though these are basketball players, from school and stuff like that and whatever you're doing at college. So plus, again, I think you're riding high off of that win. You just won that tournament. Now you come home and you face an Atlantic 10 team that hasn't been that good recently, St. Joe's. And then up next, you got to turn around, although you do have more days off. And in 6 days, you get St. Joe's. Yeah, they're playing them today. You get Kansas State, then UCLA, then Creighton. So you have 3 bigger games up on deck as well. I think Villanova might be a little bit high and mighty here after that big tournament win. And they have a bigger opponent, 3 bigger opponents up on deck. They get St. Joe's here today, and yeah, I think they could overlook them. Whereas for St. Joe's, I think they're in a good spot. They just played kind of a lackluster game against a Northeastern Conference team where they were favored by 10.5 points, and they only won by 9, even though they were winning that whole game. Probably got a little bit close for comfort as they were only winning by 5 late in that game, and they wound up not covering the spread against Sacred Heart. So a game that should have been an easier win for St. Joe's. Maybe St. Joe's had a little bit of a look ahead to this Villanova game, because what is this Villanova game? Well, Villanova is a huge opponent, of course, but not only that, but Villanova, and they're ranked 18 right now, but Villanova also is an in-state bigger brother, and I believe an in-city bigger brother, because they're both in Philadelphia. So that's a big game for St. Joe's. They're going to want to turn it on. I think it's a bad spot for Villanova. Much better spot for St. Joe's, even though it means taking a bigger number here. I'm doing it. I am on St. Joe's plus 14.5. We're doing that one. That's pick number 1. And I tend to look at the KenPom ratings and check against KenPom as well. KenPom has St. Joe's losing by 15 here, so it's in like the ballpark of like, it's not something where KenPom is so far off, and I'm going to look to like avoid it. Although if KenPom's numbers are that far off from where the books have it, you kind of got to look further into it to see like, is there an injury or something? And that might come up with one of my other plays, although I also might not care that much. So St. Joe's plus 14.5 is going to be play number 1. Play number 2 is going to be on Detroit Mercy. And this is the ugliest play on the board, man. It looks like Oakland on the road is actually up from 7 to 7.5 on the road. This is, I believe, the first conference game for both of these teams. They're both in the Horizon Conference. Oakland, no, they're not a California team. This is Oakland, Michigan. Oakland, Detroit, Michigan. Both of these teams are Detroit area teams here. So they're both playing like in their home city, which is another thing that I think factors into this a little bit. So Oakland, I think they're in a bad spot, man. They're laying a lot on the road. What are they coming off of? Well, they just played in a tournament as well, I believe. What was this tournament? I mean, no, maybe that wasn't a tournament. They're off of 3 wins in a row over Loyola Marymount, who I don't think is that bad. They played that game in the Cayman Islands over Marshall. I think these are 3 straight upsets too. So that was in the Cayman Islands too. And then over Xavier to finish it off, which was at Xavier. And this is why I'm fading them, man. That's 3 straight upsets in a row for Oakland. So maybe does that mean Oakland is better than we thought they were? I don't know, because they played Ohio State tough at the beginning of the year. They played Illinois tough. So they've certainly played a tougher schedule, and they don't have any bad losses so far on the schedule. So it's like, why am I doing this? Why do I want to play Detroit Mercy here? I think something's got to give here, and something's got to catch up to Oakland. Like, Oakland could not be higher than they are right now, and they could not be more overvalued than they are right now. So they're coming off that 14.5-point upset over Xavier after they pulled off 6.5-point upset and a 3.5-point upset over Loyola Marymount and then Marshall. They beat Xavier, and they shot out of their minds 51% from the floor, which I don't think is something that's that sustainable. They got outplayed and out-rebounded by Xavier, but Oakland had the lead for more of the game than Xavier did, and it was pretty close the whole way, and Oakland wound up coming out of there with a win. That's a huge win against a pretty good, pretty named Xavier team. We know Xavier was a pretty good team last year and one of the higher seeds in the tournament. Even though they did not do that well in the tournament, they were a 3 seed. Huge win for Oakland. Now, yeah, even though it is their conference opener, it's also the conference opener for Detroit Mercy. And now you have to go to play Detroit Mercy, who has no wins yet on the season. And yeah, Detroit, they played some okay teams. They played Toledo, who was really good in the MAC last year, probably still pretty good team. Got blown out by them. They got blown out by Cincinnati, who's not a bad team either. They lost by 1 to Ole Miss, who's not really that good, but still an SEC team. So that's not a bad performance by Detroit there, losing by 1 to Ole Miss. Then they lost to Ohio and kind of a blown out. I think Ohio is one of the better teams in the MAC too. They lost to Eastern Michigan, one of the MAC teams by 4, and then went on the road and lost to SIU Edwardsville, which that's their ugliest loss, and that's what they're coming off of. So finally, and they lost by 14 in that one, so it was another double-digit loss, but that one was to a team who's not that good, even though I think SIU Edwardsville might have won their conference last year too, the Ohio Valley or whatever they're in. They won, but like a much lesser conference. Although the Horizon's not that good of a conference either. But now Detroit, they have not won a game yet. Now they're coming out of that. They've only played 1 home game so far this year, and that was the Eastern Michigan one, where they played decently in that one and only lost by 4. Now they're coming off a bad looking road loss to not a very good team in SIU Edwardsville. They come home. They get their conference home opener now. They want to perform well. They're looking for a win. They got Oakland coming in. Oakland has been playing well on the season, and even though they're 4-3, Oakland is actually probably better than their record indicates because they've played such tough teams. But I'm fading Oakland here. I just think the spot is bad for them. They played well in that Cayman Islands tournament, where I think Drake must have been the other game that they played in that tournament, which is why they didn't win it, because they won the other 2 games in that tournament. And they're coming off their biggest win of the year, an upset in Xavier's house. And that was how many days ago was that? Now you're coming out of that. That was the 27th. So now you're coming out of that, and you have IPFW up next. And IPFW is actually atop the Horizon right now, even though Horizon play hasn't started yet. They're 6-1 overall. They've faced a bit of an easier schedule, though, but even so, IPFW has been playing pretty well to start the season, so you might have one eye looking ahead to that. You might overlook an 0-6 team. It's your second straight road game. You got to go and somehow try to get focused against a winless team, and you have IPFW, and then you got Toledo up next too, which is a bigger game as well, out of conference game there. So I think it's a bad spot for Oakland. I think they're in a major letdown spot. I think it's kind of a sandwich spot with IPFW being atop the Horizon, whereas Detroit Mercy is at the bottom of the Horizon right now. The Horizon hasn't started yet. The Horizon play hasn't started yet. The market looks like it's maybe a little bit going against me here. I'm going to suck it up and just do it in this case. And then I don't know what Ken Palm's got going on in this one, but they got Oakland winning this game by 7, even though they have Detroit Mercy as one of the worst teams in college basketball. I think Detroit had like one star player on last year's team, and I think he wound up getting hurt like in the conference tournament, and I think he graduated or something. So they really are in like rebuilding mode. But I just think it's a bad spot for Oakland, man. So I'm taking all the points. Nobody's gonna want it. It's real ugly. Nobody's gonna want it. I'm on Detroit Mercy. Moving on, we got to get through these. I'm fading Texas A&M next as well. And what's going on with Texas A&M? Let's see. Well, first of all, we got the line has moved up a little bit on Virginia from a pick'em to a 1.5. So the line is moving on Virginia a little bit. And this is one of the situations where you have a ranked team in Texas A&M playing against an unranked in Virginia. So I think just eyeballing at the recreational bettors might be like, oh, well, that means, of course, Texas A&M is much better than Virginia. They're ranked 14. Virginia's unranked. I think it's a lot closer than that. Texas A&M is the better team, yes, but I think it's a lot closer than that. Ken Palm has Virginia winning this game by 1 point at home. Virginia was in the rankings until recently. They let a couple of games slip, I believe, and they have not looked that good. Texas A&M have kind of looked too good. They've only lost one game on the season, which was in the tournament that they were in to FAU. They lost in whatever that tournament was, the ESPN Events Invitational. Is that what it was? I guess so. So they lost to FAU, so they didn't win that tournament, but they played some tough teams. They've had a tough schedule so far. There's no denying that. Having to play Ohio State, SMU, who's not bad, or Roberts. I don't even think it's that bad either. Penn State's not that terrible. And then losing to FAU, who's, of course, a ranked team coming off that Final Four appearance last year with a lot of returning starters with FAU. And then they're coming off a win over Iowa State, which is another pretty big win. So, and that was a tight game. They're coming off that huge effort, a bunch of like high effort games in a row. And now with 2 days off, you have to go on the road to face Virginia, and you haven't played that many road games yet. You played 2 on the season. And yes, Texas A&M did win both of those somewhat convincingly, but I think Virginia is going to be the best team that they've played on the road so far. Maybe Ohio, I guess maybe Ohio State is. I don't know. It's tough to determine right now, but this is going to be a tough game for Texas A&M. I like the way the market is moving. I like how the market is going against the rankings there. And yeah, even though Virginia is an opponent you're going to be focused on, but one of the main reasons I like this is the Virginia side of things. I think it's a positive for Virginia. So even though Texas A&M is coming out of that slew of big games, this might also be considered a big game for them. But I think the values on the Virginia side, I think Texas A&M has got to be a bit overvalued. This one, Virginia, I think, is a little bit undervalued because their schedule hasn't been impressive so far. They beat Florida early in the season. It's not that impressive. They lost pretty badly to Wisconsin, who's probably a decent team, but that loss looks really ugly. And then what did they do last? They came out of that, which I think was a sandwich spot, really. And you're coming off your first loss. I think it was a bad spot for them coming off that Wisconsin loss. They played West Virginia at home, and they had this game up on the horizon. Even though, West Virginia, pretty decent team too. West Virginia is the team that I mentioned coming off of that game against Virginia. I took Bellarmine against them because I thought West Virginia was in a bad spot after playing Virginia really tough to within 2. West Virginia, as I mentioned, is a team that has pretty much entirely reloaded. They lost guys to the transfer portal, to graduation, and I think maybe to even injury. So West Virginia, they're a team that has like no returning starters that were on the team last year. So that's not a great game for Virginia, and that's what they're coming off. Virginia, I believe, must have been a pretty substantial favorite in that one, and it was close. They were a 9.5 point favorite, and they barely escaped. So when you have that near escape like that, I think you show up in the next game and you want to play well. You got a ranked team coming into your house, man. And Virginia has extra days off as well compared to that other one. They've had almost a week off now. Yeah, they last played a week ago. Although actually that West Virginia game was not at home, excuse me. That was at Fort Myers. So Virginia was 9.5 on a neutral there, and they barely escaped that game. So I think when you have that much time off, even though, it's a return home for Virginia, you have a ranked team coming into your house. I expect Virginia to be focused here. So that's what I'm looking at there. I'm looking at Virginia in that one. And then I forgot to look at what Detroit Mercy, how many God, I'm running out of time here. How many days off they've had? Yeah, they've only had 3 days off. But I think Oakland has had fewer days off than that. So I think Oakland has only had 1 or 2 days off. So Detroit Mercy has like an extra day off to try to kill their losing momentum. Moving on, let's get this done quickly here. Play number 3 is going to be on, who else am I on here? Oh, no, that was play 3, right? Because I had St. Joe's. Yeah, St. Joe's, Detroit, Virginia, and then we'll finish it off. We're going against Florida State, man. Even though this line has gone up, I think something's got to give here. They've gone up from 7.5 to 9.5, but Ken Palm actually has this game at 5, which is kind of confusing me. I don't know if that means there's some sort of injury on the Georgia side, but the line has moved up a bit on Florida State to 9.5, to the point where I think there's got to be some value in taking Georgia here with the line moving up that high. And this is going to be a fade of Florida State because I think they're in a sandwich spot. They just won their early season tournament, which was the what was it? I don't even the Sunshine Slam. So it was a kind of a home state tournament for Florida State there. They won that tournament, I believe. They beat UNLV and they beat Colorado to finish that. Did they win the tournament? I'm not even sure. They might have lost. I don't know if Florida was also in that because they lost to Florida pretty badly. No, it looks like that was not in the tournament. So I think Florida State did win the tournament, and I'm fading them off of that. They have this game sandwiched in between 2 ranked teams, man. So they beat UNLV, which UNLV, we don't know how good they are, really, I don't think. But then they finished it off with a big win against a ranked team in Colorado. So that was a pretty big win that went into overtime, although they've had almost a week off since then. But I think that week off might hurt them when you've like just won a tournament. You've had a big game. You might just be like kind of returning back to your campus and like basking in that glow. You didn't really have to travel for the Sunshine Slam because you're kind of staying in at home there. So you might just be sitting around like kind of basking in that, and having those many days off might disrupt your winning momentum there a little bit. Excuse me. Now you got a home game against a Georgia team that nobody's really going to be paying attention to, and you have to turn around on Saturday and play North Carolina, which is a big game against a ranked team. So I think it's a letdown and a look ahead spot here. So you just won against Colorado, like I said, overtime against a ranked team. You've been sitting around for a bunch of days. Are you really going to be prepared for Georgia here, or are you still basking in that win and having one eye looking ahead to that bigger game against North Carolina coming up? I think the latter is going to be the case there. I'm taking Georgia plus the 9.5. I think it's a sandwich on Florida State there in Georgia. They're coming off a win over Winthrop. Like, who cares, really? They beat Winthrop on November 24th, so they've had fewer days off, but I think that might be more of a momentum continuer because you had that win over Winthrop, and you don't have that many days off, and you're probably going to be looking to this game here. Georgia was a 9.5-point favorite in that one, and they only won by 9, so it was more of a close call there. They might consider that to be a bit of an escape because they're only winning by 5 in that game pretty late in the final minute of that game, too. So they kind of just got out of there with a win. Kind of like whatever one of those other teams was that Virginia, I think, had a near loss as a pretty big favorite. Georgia kind of is in that case as well, where that's a game that's going to make you focus more. And you might have already had one eye looking ahead to that bigger game, which is why you kind of had that slip up and needed that escape in that previous game. So I'm on Georgia plus 9.5. College basketball, St. Joe's plus 14.5. Detroit Mercy plus 7.5. Virginia -1. Georgia plus 9.5. Moving real quick, we have small slates here in the NHL and NBA. Let's talk about these games real quick. NHL, this is classic. You know what I'm doing. I'm fading the Columbus Blue Jackets after they upset my Bruins in almost dominant fashion. I don't know what's going on with the Bruins. I don't care because Columbus sucks, and they're up from a -125 money line favorite to -131 at home with 97% of the cash and 83% of the tickets on Columbus. So they look like they have the cash discrepancy. I don't care because it looks like they are the public team at this point. The record actually isn't that bad now, 7-12-4, and they're on a nice run here where they won 3 out of 4, but they beat Chicago, which Chicago's not very good. So that's not really that impressive. They beat New Jersey, who hasn't been playing well recently. Then they went out on the road and played well against Carolina, but lost. Then they played their 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities, coming back home. Tough spot to be in, but it was against the Boston Bruins, and they beat the Bruins. Now they only have 1 day off, staying at home now after that, but now this is still a 4th game this is again a 3rd game in 4 days, but it's also a 4th game in 6 days as well, I believe, and a 5th in 7 or 5th and 8, something like that. So they've had a pretty jammed schedule. I think it's a huge letdown spot of a dominant win over Boston. It's kind of as simple as that. They do have Ottawa up next, who I believe has a better record than Montreal. I think their records are close. They're like right around the same. And then they have Boston again after that. So, but this is all a play where Columbus is in a letdown spot here, man. And your Montreal, they're coming off an ugly loss. They played the Los Angeles Kings, who are a good team, but they didn't play well. They're coming off a 4-0 loss. They got shut out, and they have more days off now. They have 3 days off to try to recoup their losses after that and focus on this game against Columbus. I think the extra days off and the fact that they're coming off a shutout loss like that, even though it was against a good team, that's going to help Montreal refocus a little bit. This is the final game of a road trip, but they've had a bunch of those days off there to help kind of prepare for this game. So they're 2-2 on the road trip right now, and they want to split the road trip. And people are also going to look and say Montreal just played the Bruins and they lost in Boston, although they did beat the Bruins in overtime at home not that long ago as well. And the Bruins got revenge on them on this road trip, but they did just lose to the Bruins 5-2. And people are going to see that and then see that Columbus beat the Bruins 5-2 and think this is easy. Then Columbus is going to beat Montreal, even though Columbus actually has the worse record than Montreal. It's kind of close here. I think Columbus is in a massive letdown spot. They're not a very good team. Montreal's got an extra day of rest, or extra 2 maybe even. Even though they're finishing the road trip here, so they've been on the road for a while. Like I said, they have extra rest. I think they're going to be focused here. I like the Montreal Canadiens in this one. Getting the underdog price. Let's do it. It's just basically as simple as Columbus is in a letdown spot. We're doing it, and then moving to the NBA real quick here. I looked into potentially playing against the Kings real quick because they played last night and they had a huge comeback. They were getting blown out by Golden State. Looked like the game was over, and that was last night. And they wound up somehow winning the game, and now they have to play again, even though both games are at home. Back-to-back, they have the Clippers coming in, and I think it's a bad spot for the Kings, but they have 91% of the cash on them, but 58% of the tickets. So they are, I guess, the public home team, but it looks like the cash discrepancy is on the Kings. The Clippers have gone up from pick them to a 1.5 point road favorite there. But the one thing that keeps me off of it is that the Clippers are off a big game too. They played the Nuggets pretty tough as well, and they'd blown out the Mavs the game before that. So I think both teams are kind of in a bad spot there, but the Kings are really in a bad spot after that furious comeback, which I had the game on TV, and I just stopped paying attention because they were losing by so much close to the end of that game. I was shocked when I saw the final score. Don't know how Sacramento came back and won that game against Golden State, but they did. That's not the game that I'm on, though. The game that I'm on is the New Orleans Pelicans, man. And there might be a reverse injured player theory aspect to it, and I just don't even care at this point because I think it's a bad spot for the Sixers. Sixers are up from a 1 point favorite to a 1.5 point favorite. I don't really care about that either. I don't really see the market percentages on this one yet, but I think it's a bad spot for the Sixers, even if there is that McCollum return here. The Sixers, what are they up to here? Well, the Sixers, God, if this would load, because I got to get out of here. Thanks, ESPN. They couldn't have looked any better, man. They played a slew of big games, even though they got blown out by the Timberwolves back when they played them on the road. They went to Oklahoma City and beat them, an Oklahoma City team that was really hot. They came back home from the 2-day road trip, and they beat the Lakers by 44 points. Am I reading that right? You're coming off a 44-point win over LeBron's Lakers now. And now, even though, you're starting a road trip here, you're going to New Orleans with only 1 day off, and you have the Boston Celtics up next. Your rival in the Eastern Conference and in your division, you're really close to the Boston Celtics in the standings. I think it's a huge look ahead to the Celtics. That's a huge game for Philadelphia on deck. They're coming off a 40-something point win over the Lakers where they could not have possibly looked better. This is a sandwich spot for them, man. It's plain and simple. It's a sandwich spot, and the line looks kind of suspicious. Like, how could Philadelphia, the team with the way better record, be basically just pick the winner against New Orleans? That looks suspicious. New Orleans has lost 2 games in a row, and they're returning home from a road trip, and this is a rare situation where I'm actually going to be on a team returning from a road trip. It's only a 3-day road trip, even though, they've had 1 day off, and they are playing a packed schedule. There's no denying that. It's going to be a 3rd game in 4 days and a 4th game in 6 days. And in three different cities now because they played at the Clippers and beat them, but then they lost 2 games in Utah. And that's why I'm doing this, man. You're coming off 2 bad games against Utah. I think you're going to be focused. You blew the first game, which fortunately for me, I was on, and that ragtag Utah team made a big late comeback to win that game. Then you were in the zigzag spot, and you were a more substantial road favorite against Utah in the next game. I don't know why the line moved that much. I thought the Pelicans were in the spot to rebound, but they were not. They dropped both of those games. And now I think it's got to be a spot where you're going to try to rebound a little bit. You have this game to focus on. You don't really have anything on deck. You kind of had a lapse of focus in that previous game. I like it. I think Philadelphia's in a major sandwich spot here. So even though Pelicans maybe are not in the best spot, they did not play well in those last couple of games against a team with a really bad record. They're looking to bounce back here. I like it. I like the Pelicans. And like I said, though, McCollum might be coming back, but it's not confirmed yet. So if it is confirmed, I think the line might move a bit more, even though the line might be taking that into effect a little bit. I think that's not going to affect the Pelicans that much because they were not playing well in those last 2 games. Even though they played decently overall without him, those last 2 games were so bad that I think they're going to want him back and they're going to want to be focused on this. Even though they have to reincorporate him into the lineup and the line might move because you got your star player back. But in this case, I think it's going to be more of a positive than a negative for the Pelicans here. I'm bucking the reverse injured player theory in that one. That's going to do it, man. All those plays, hopefully you remember them all. Let's do it. I got to get out of here. Have a good day. Hopefully we get some wins here with 6 plays. Peace.